Okay, we're back again. We're going to do a little quick video about the literature review. You guys by now have hopefully all read the articles on the Treaty of Versailles that either, let's see, Wilson's to blame a whole lot, isn't he? Wilson does many bad things. The French get blamed quite a bit. Trachtenberg says, no, it's not really the French. Um, what else? We have Walsh in there. We got Henry Cabot Lodge. We have the debates between the fundamentalist Protestants. So we have all kinds of explanations about what contributed to the failure of the Treaty of Versailles. In your literature review, that's what I want you to discuss. So in 1,000 words, which is about 4 pages, I want you to talk about the failure of the Treaty of Versailles, and I want you to group interpretations together. I want you to look for common themes, causality, what caused what to happen. We'll go through the articles fairly quickly in just a second, but that's what I want you to focus on. How do historians explain the cause of events? I want you to discuss as many of the historians as you possibly can. You won't be able to squeeze them all in, but maybe in a paragraph you can group a couple interpretations together. You might focus, say, more on the Senate debates and less on the European context, but you're still going to have a paragraph that talks about the articles that discuss the European context. So make sure you do everything um, to include as many articles as you possibly can. The first article we looked at is Schmidt's Peace Treaties of 1919-1920. This gives us a nice overview of the treaty process. I didn't expect you guys to be experts on this stuff, and so I threw this one on there. It's not great history from an explanation standpoint. It basically says that the treaties weren't bad, but they failed because the Allies didn't stay united in their support of the treaties. But of course, the Allies weren't united because the treaties were bad because the Allies didn't approve the treaties. So there's problems with that, right? You got to stick with the things that actually happened. But it is a really good discussion of some of the main concerns about the Treaty of Versailles. The next one, disillusionment of a progressive. Senator David Walsh in the League of Nations issue. This is Flanagan in the New England Quarterly. He's writing in 1968. So what do we got going on? We got Vietnam, we got the Cold War. I don't know if we see any of these interpretations or any of these, not interpretations, sorry, any of these events shining through, but they could be in there. So think about that too. Think about when the articles are written when you're writing your literature review. He basically says that Wilson compromised on his self-determination, especially regarding the Irish, and so this Democrat turns against Wilson for not being idealistic enough, right? That's sort of a different twist than the other articles. He also talks about the national election and Walsh's role in that. It's kind of a sub argument about how important this is. But as far as why the treaty failed, Flanagan kind of falls into another line of thinking, right? Another common theme about ideas and compromise. Henry Cabot Lodge in the League of Nations. This is Hughes. I don't know if you noticed this about Hughes, but he is the chief of military history for the Department of the Army. This paper was originally delivered to the American Historical Association, and he basically says Henry Cabot Lodge compromised, Wilson did not compromise, and it takes a different look at the normal way that it's spun, slightly. It also talks about moral versus legal. That's a sub argument, and it's important for the claims that Hughes is making. It may or may not be important for your actual literature review. The next one, Trachtenberg, Versailles after 60 years. This is historiographical. So he's looking at books that have already been written, claims that have already been made, and then he's trying to analyze them. His argument is that we've got this sort of polarized interpretation, and it was actually much more complicated than that. The French weren't simply, you know, what is it, Carthaginian, this great reference to the Carthage War, where in that case, what Rome sowed salt into the soil of Carthage, and so it would never be able to return again. Um, he says it's more complicated. This is another big thing for historians is complexity. But he also has quite a bit to say about Wilson and what he was doing over there. So it contributes to the notion of Wilson's idealism versus compromise. There actually was quite a bit of compromise going on in the Treaty of Versailles. All right. Ambrosius, he looks right at the stroke issue. This is commonplace. This is in every U.S. history textbook. The stroke was the final nail, right? Wilson probably wasn't going to compromise, but then the stroke made it so he wouldn't compromise. Ambrosius, being a good historian, says, well, it's the context, right? It's not the stroke. To focus on the stroke, even though it happened, that's the wrong kind of event. And it's really Wilson's progressivism, it's his Protestantism, it's his sense of American mission that is the underlying reason for his refusal to compromise. And the stroke doesn't really have that much to do with it, although it is important, right? But before the stroke, he acted one way, and after the stroke, he acted the same way. So in the final analysis for Ambrosius, it's all about context. All right, and the final one, I'm going to make this bigger for you guys. This is church history, and it is conservative American Protestantism in the League of Nations controversy. Part of the subtext of this article is the Scopes trial. We look at the Scopes trial and we typically say that's when fundamentalism and modernity clashed for the first time. That's the great science versus Bible debate. Rotzilla, yeah, sure, we'll call it that. Marcou Rotzilla says, no, 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 no. Actually, it's the Treaty of Versailles. That's when we see the first political, religious controversy about the growing fundamentalist movement. For those of you who don't know, fundamentalism as a thing really starts happening in the 19 teens. There's actually pamphlets talking about the fundamentals of, I want to say, Christianity, where you get the term fundamentalism, and there's this revivalist kind of notion. So this article is only partially talking about the Treaty of Versailles. It's really talking about church history, right? But in it, the author makes the claim that there's a broader base to the rejection of the treaty, right? It wasn't just the Senate. There's people who are actually involved in this, and you don't get that sense as much from the other articles. So I thought this was a really important inclusion, and it's a different kind of history. It's also the most recent article in 2003. So think about that. How does that change it, or does it change it? Okay, I've rambled on for about 8 minutes. I hope this finds you well, and we'll be in touch. I put some documents online. Let me show you one more document before I go. Oh boy, where is it? Here it is. This is a document I put up. I'm calling it TOV, Main Thesis Statements. And I go through each of the articles and give you a little note about some of it, and then give you what I think is the main thesis. My son's trying to poke his head in here.
Dad?
All right, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye bye.